Joe Biden declares victory, but it isn't over yet, folks. Do Democrats now demand unity or a purge? What about those dance parties on the streets of major cities? No COVID problems? A Pfizer vaccine that may be 90% effective, and Governor Cuomo doesn't want Trump to distribute it. Welcome, everybody, to the Buck Sexton Show. Yes, I know we are now in a country where we're expected, according to the media, according to the Democrat Party, expected to just accept the premature declaration of Joe Biden that he is, in fact, the president of the United States. We're supposed to accept this as gospel. And anybody right now who speaks out in favor of just checking to make sure. I have not yet come on this show and said the election was stolen. I have my suspicions about how fraud occurred and how, therefore, it is possible that there were certainly a state or two or more that were stolen, but I do not know, so I will not say. I cannot prove, so I will not declare. But I want answers. I insist we get answers. And this is where it comes down to all of us asking for process here. There is a process. The courts exist for exactly this kind of a dispute in an election, whether it was for local dog catcher or president of the United States. In a disputed election, you take it to the courts. That's what happens. That's every bit as much a part of our system as the actual process of voting and counting votes and everything else that we have seen, right? So Democrats that are trying to shut this down and shout down those that are asking for answers are acting in bad faith, which is entirely unsurprising. You should expect a lot more of that. There will be nothing but that until Joe Biden takes office. If you even raise the agreed upon irregularities that always somehow seem to favor Joe Biden. If you point out those irregularities, you are a conspiracy theorist. But it's reported. I mean, we know about what happened in Michigan where you had software that changed thousands of votes to Joe Biden. That's fact. That's not disputed. And I understand they'll say, well, we fixed that. Okay. Do we know if that happened in dozens of other counties, including in other states that use the same software? Has anyone checked to look into this? Why do states have automatic recounts? Just think about this. If we're really going to speak about our system and the process, why do some states have in place an automatic recount? And it is triggered if the numbers are at a certain threshold. Is that because people are conspiracy theorists? Is that because they're making unfounded allegations of cheating? Or is it because anybody who looks at a highly complex and ever-changing, especially this year thanks to Democrats, election system, both for the voting and the processing of ballots, and anyone who looks at this and is honest recognizes that there are going to be problems. There are going to be problems that are accidental. There are going to be problems that are intentional. There will be irregularities, mess-ups, and fraud. That's why in a really close election, you have a recount. It's to account for those things. If you lose by enough, it doesn't really matter. That's the way that we've come to accept election calls. If you are down, by an enormous margin, you'll notice we're not challenging the results in California. We're not challenging the results in New York. We understand that there are states that Trump lost, obviously. But there are states where Trump was winning by a very small amount. And then a day, 2, 3 days later, he was losing by a very small amount. And that demands investigation. Absolutely. What's the problem with that? There is no problem with it other than Democrats want to have victory parties right away. They want to jump right to the part where we all have to just accept their demands. And anybody who has any questions about the legitimacy of this Biden win is a bad person who doesn't believe in math and science and whatever else they're going to say. Elections, you're undermining our democracy. They have been saying, and I don't think the Democrats have really caught on to this, they've been saying that Trump and his supporters have been undermining democracy for 4 years now. Really everything we want and do, just casting a vote for Trump, just speaking out in support of Trump, they say is undermining democracy. So that charge doesn't have quite the teeth that it used to. People aren't saying, oh my gosh, I don't want to be somebody who undermines democracy, so I'll do whatever the libs tell me to. There are real legal challenges underway. Do I think it is likely at this point that they will be willing to flip? Now, that's a different thing than, do I think there was fraud? Yes. Do I know how much? No, I don't. Do I think that courts will be willing in different states and, depending on what the specifics of the allegation may be, do I think the courts will be willing to overturn this election? That's a question we all have to really think about. Do you believe that a federal judge, let's say, in Pennsylvania, or a federal judge in Arizona, any federal judge, is going to be willing to take the heat of flipping that state? You could say, well, Buck, they'll kick it up to the Supreme Court. Well, that all depends on how the challenges go through the system. Do you really think they'll be willing to do that? I'm not confident about that. And so at this stage, I say, we must fight. Of course we fight. And we're happy warriors. We're not bitter. We're not spiteful toward the other side. They had a big victory celebration all weekend. We'll talk about that because all of a sudden social distancing isn't really a concern anymore. Isn't that interesting? But they had a huge victory weekend. And for the first time in a long time, I saw New York City happy. And that was, I will tell you that it was a nice change from the misery and despair largely driven by stupid Democrat policies and a media invested in an apocalyptic narrative of constant COVID panic. But we were relieved of that burden psychologically for a couple of days in the city. But I'm happy to see people, my fellow Americans, I'm happy to see that they were joyous for a little bit, even if they were premature in their celebrations and if they were making a mockery of the very COVID rules that they scream at all the rest of us. A lot of people walking around without masks on. A lot of people, not everybody, of course. A lot of people were not social distancing. I think social distancing and masks outside are largely unnecessary and often absurd. But that's always my position. They're the ones that change depending on what the political needs of the moment may be. And so here we are, friends. We make a decision. We fight on. What other choice is there? We're going to cave? No, we owe it to ourselves. In fact, we owe it to our democracy, if we're going to start speaking in these grandiose terms. We owe it to our system to make sure that people of good faith and goodwill who approach these issues with honesty, that those people can look at their fellow Americans who voted for Joe Biden and say, okay, it looks like you actually did win this one. Now let's get to the business of preventing Biden and the crazy left-wing Democrats who are going to be controlling him from ruining the country. But I'm willing to get to that point. I'm not a dead ender. I'm not sitting here and saying it's not possible that Donald Trump lost. It looks shaky to me, the way that this happened, but it's a reality that I take into account. And we should remember that that's something the other side has already shown us they are not willing to do. They lied about the 2016 election in calculated and vicious fashion. I mean, they were willing to not just use the fabrication of Russia collusion against the Trump administration to undermine it and to try and stifle and in every way it could slow the agenda, but also they weaponized it legally. I mean, they used it as the basis for a criminal investigation. They were trying to prosecute people around a total fabrication, and it was all driven by their hatred of Donald Trump and their rejection of the will as expressed by the American people in 2016. So we already know who they are. We already know what the Democrat mentality is around all of this. We also know that there were no riots this weekend from Trump supporters, no businesses burned to the ground. Morons at the Washington Post, the New York Times, other places, they were coming after me this weekend. Well, look at this person here or that person there who said something mean or, whatever it may be. Okay. I didn't say there's no such thing as a Trump supporter who steps out of line. I said that the Trump movement and the overwhelming 99.9% of Trump supporters are peaceful, law-abiding, and accept where we are right now in this process. And that Democrats would not do that. The barricades, the wooden barriers around businesses here in New York City, they've started to come down. Why? Because Democrats aren't going to riot. We all know. We all know that's what that's all about. That's what they were preparing for. They weren't worried about Trump supporters. And what does that say? You know, whenever you have a moment where you think, gosh, it'd be so much easier, and it would, I'm not going to lie to you, especially if you live in a city, so much easier. Biden, Harris, yeah, and all the celebrities, and the celebrities will like your tweets, and the fancy rich people in the Democrat Party will say, yeah, you're one of us. It's so seductive to just join this mob of the Democrat Party that thinks that all you have to do to be a good person is be a part of it. Yeah, man, then you're one of the good people. I say to you, just remember that same political party is responsible for rioting and looting and mayhem across the country that continues to this day. Just over the weekend, I think it was out in Portland, but who even knows? They were going out and demanding people, BLM protesters, demanding solidarity from people eating dinner, and that's threatening. When a mob demands you pay political obedience to them, and you're just trying to live your life, that's threatening. That's not okay. Those are all Democrats doing that. These are all leftists and activists who are making these demands, who are inflicting themselves upon other people. So at least we should take some credit for that. We should have a moment where we get to say, when it comes to issues of being an adult and respecting the process as it is, and understanding that this isn't about going scorched earth and burning down the country if we can't have control of it. That's not our approach. We are better than the other side when it comes to that. So just remember that. They hate it when you'll say that because they know that it's true. Not a single business owner, not a single person walking down the street peaceably across the country has any fear of a Trump mob coming after them. It's not true in the other direction. It's not true about Democrats, BLM supporters, Antifa. And we all know it. What does that tell you? But just remember, as these legal challenges begin to make their way through this process, that they are completely legitimate to ask these questions, to pose these challenges in the right forum, in the right way. And we continue to fight. This is not over yet. I recently got a crash course in home title theft. You better pray this crime never happens to you. It goes after your most valuable asset, your home. Here's how it works. Your home's title, believe it or not, it exists online. It's in the cloud. It's stored on servers. The bad guys, cyber thieves, they hack in, and then they use a quit claim deed to kick you off, put themselves on your home's title. And you often don't find out about this until you get a payment demand in the mail, perhaps even a foreclosure notice. You have to create a virtual barrier around your home's title with Home Title Lock. Just go to HomeTitleLock.com, use the promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. You can also check online to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it, which does happen to people. So you need to go right now, create that virtual barrier around your home's title with HomeTitleLock.com. Don't wait until this crime possibly ruins you financially. Take action today. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO.
Well, it is a regional increase that we're seeing. We are testing more. And frankly, George, I'm not going to take advice from Governor Cuomo. He has the second worst death rate per 100,000 people in this nation. He's at 173 deaths per 100,000 per capita. South Dakota's at 54. I appreciated that President Trump gave us the flexibility to do the right thing in our state, and will continue to do that. He let me do my job. But the other thing that I think is going on here, George, is that this is all premature. This is a premature conversation because we have not finished counting votes. There are states that have not been called, and back in 2000, Al Gore was given his day in court. We should give President Trump his day in court, let the process unfold, because, George, we live in a republic. We are a government that gets its power from the consent of the governed. That is the people. They give their consent on Election Day. Election Day needs to be fair, honest, and transparent. And we need to be sure that we had an honest election before we decide who gets to be in the White House.
Kristi Noem is spot on here. I also think she should be talked about more as the part of the future, really, of the Republican Party. Just exceptional. I'm a Kristi Noem fan. As much as I'm a fan of anybody in politics, I always try to keep a little bit of a distance from politicians in general. But she's pretty darn good. And what she's saying here, she handles two critical points. And we'll get to the Cuomo issue later and this new era of the fight against COVID. Some big news today that I will get to as well about vaccines and what we can expect now as a country going forward. But Al Gore did get his day in court. We should not be cowed. We should not submit to the demands of the Democrats right now, which is that we just move on. We just quit. You know, do you want to see what really happened here?
Or do you want to listen to Brian Stelter, who's like, really, excuse me, we need to be real journalists here. CNN has a lot of real journalists. And, election denialism.
Play 10.
I do think at the same time, we should all recognize that there is election denialism going on. There are crazy conspiracy theories out there being read by millions of people. Tens of millions of people are seeing this stuff on Fox News about voter fraud. And it is real. And election denialism is real. And it has to be called out, although I understand why the Biden campaign is trying to move past it.
Yeah, move past it being the operative part of all this. Of course the Biden campaign wants to move past it. Let's just, as a thought experiment, what do you think happens in this country if and I'm telling you right now, I want to be very clear, we don't have this yet, and I don't know if we will. But even if we get one absolutely clear case of election fraud, one straight up, they were, meaning Democrats in one of these pivotal areas, were cheating. It was intentional. We got them red-handed. They were caught. And let's say it involved a few thousand votes, okay? Which would not necessarily, although it could change some of these states, but wouldn't necessarily be the margin of victory or defeat. But if we find one, trust me when I tell you right now, the Democrats, they won't even blink, and they'll say, just one bad apple, just one instance. Of course, we always knew there was going to be some. They're going to forget about all the claims that there was no fraud, which is what they're saying. There's no fraud. That's a conspiracy. The conspiracy theory, as Brian Stelter says. There's no fraud. And then we move to, okay, well, fine. Maybe that wasn't true. And I think everyone needs to be prepared for the fact that the Democrat apparatus and the media, no matter how much fraud is uncovered, will claim that Joe Biden won this election. They'll never change. I will accept, depending on how these court challenges go, the possibility that Trump did, in fact, lose this election. But I'm telling you to prepare yourself right now. It simply doesn't matter to the Democrats. They will not accept it if these court challenges, or if absolute clear fraud is established, because it's not about what's right. It's about power. It's about being in charge. And now they think their guy will be in charge. And they're not giving that up no matter what. So all their talk now about, undermining our democracy, just remember that, because if we uncover any fraud, you'll see who they really are. They'll become fraud denialists.
For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself, but now let's give each other a chance. It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again, and to make progress We have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies. They are Americans. They're Americans.
It's not going to be that easy, Joe. Sorry. Not going to just right now let bygones be bygones. A lot of us, 70 plus million of us who voted for Donald Trump, have very clear memory of what the Democrats were saying about not just Trump, but his supporters for the last 4 years. They claimed this president was a traitor. They claimed he was a rapist. They claimed he was literally like crazy, right? Meaning he'd have to be removed with the 25th Amendment, or that he was not of sound mind. They've claimed that he is a racist, gives aid and comfort to the Ku Klux Klan, that he's a white nationalist. They said the most horrible things imaginable about the president and used those allegations, those baseless, moronic allegations, as a club to attack his supporters. How could you? If you vote for Trump, you're a racist too. Which is so fascinating considering what we saw among the surge in black and Latino voters for Trump after he was president for 4 years, right? So they saw who this guy was in office in his actions, never mind the rhetoric during a campaign. They said, and more black and Latino voters, God bless them, said, yeah, I want more of this guy. This is actually better. Better for America, better for our communities. But now you have this dichotomy. You have this separation, the Democrats, between the calls for unity and the calls for a purge. Now, the unity calls are laughable because they still have utter disdain for Trump voters. They haven't changed at all. Joe Biden didn't run on a platform of I'm going to make the country a better place, because even if you're not a Democrat, you're going to see that everything that I do is on the up and up. And no, he ran on Trump is the most awful human being ever and killed 200,000 people with COVID. It's like he coughed on them himself and made them all die. That was really the thrust of the Biden campaign. I'm not Trump, and Trump is almost worse than Hitler, so vote for me. And we all remember that. And we remember the special counsel, the Russia collusion farce. Remember the sham impeachment by Nancy Pelosi. We remember all of this. And they want us to just pretend none of that happened. They want us to act like we're all just friends. Now remember, we're Republicans. We're conservatives. So, yeah, we've always viewed our fellow Americans as just that. They're our fellow Americans. We're not going out there threatening anybody. We're not burning down buildings or rioting in neighborhoods and attacking cops and making all kinds of crazy demands. Not gathering with all my media allies, outnumbering the other side 10-1, as the Democrats do to us, and demanding they be deplatformed. No, we don't do those things. But that doesn't mean that we're going to forget. These calls for unity are going to fade very quickly when we see that the Democrat Party of today has no interest whatsoever in reaching out to the other side on anything. It's the Democrats want what they want on all of this. They want amnesty. Trust me, they're going to go for that. That's going to be the first thing they really try to get done. The Biden campaign has already said, they're assuming, of course, that he's won, and they've already said what his early executive actions will be. He's going to repeal the so-called Muslim travel ban, which is not even in any way an accurate description now. It included North Korea and Venezuela. But anyway, they're going to repeal that. Fine, whatever. They better hope that one doesn't come back to bite them. Who knows? But they're going to repeal that. They're going to get rid of the Mexico City rule. So they're going to make sure that taxpayer dollars are going for abortion. That's like a really big thing for Democrats right away. And they're going to sue nuns, under, they want to get that mandate going again under Obamacare. So everybody has to pay for all kinds of drugs, including those that violate their sincerely held religious beliefs. And it's just going to be a years-long effort if Biden does, in fact, end up as the president, which I'm still saying is an if. It'll be a years-long effort to rub Trump supporters' faces in it. And here's the problem, folks. We're not going away. There's a belief among Democrats that anything was justified to stop Trump. Anything was justified to prevent him from having his mark on the country. And that was really the central belief of the media throughout the Trump presidency. And that's what we saw with not only Russia special counsel nonsense and impeachment and everything else they did against Trump, but also with the attacks on Brett Kavanaugh. Whatever the tactics were that they felt were most effective, they would use them. It didn't matter what it did to the country. It didn't matter how underhanded it all was. And we remember that. This is the part that I'm not sure they really counted on. And they have radicalized conservatives, not in the sense that we're radicals who are going to break laws and act like savages, but we have been radicalized in that we understand the nature of the political environment we're in, this political battle. We lose, or they'll make us do stuff that's just wrong. They'll make us do stuff that's unconstitutional, that violates moral, ethical precepts. They'll do things that are contradictory, that exceed their constitutional mandate. So we win, or that happens. And that's where we are. This old notion that if only Republicans just keep feeding the alligator, we can wait until it eats us last. I think that's gone away. Although there is an effort underway right now to try to bring it back. You're seeing that. We'll talk about Mitt Romney and the other Rhino Squad later. But so the efforts at unity aren't really efforts. It's just a self-congratulatory demand. Okay, forget about all that stuff we did to you, conservatives. Forget about all the stuff we said about Trump and said about Trump supporters. Now we're saying we're going to be nice, so you have to do what we say. No. I say no. I do not concede in many ways. I will not allow this gaslighting to go without response. And then there are the people that are demanding a purge. And this is fascinating because while we're hearing some Democrats with this unity push, you have other prominent voices out there, including people like AOC, other voices out there that are saying there must be accountability for those who supported Trump. So which is it? Are we all friends now, and we're going to move together forward into the future as Americans, or whatever other boilerplate nonsense the Biden campaign's spewing right now? Or are we expected to have punishments doled out for people that supported the duly elected president of the United States for 4 years? I'm just wondering which one it's actually going to be. I think we should have a right to know. And the problem the Democrats have is they can't decide. They can't decide because they have their own lunatics. And there are turncoat fake Republicans out there who are also looking to settle scores, which is not exactly a great idea when you're calling for unity, is it?
I also want to echo something that my friend EJ said. It's not only that Trump has to lose, but that all his enablers have to lose. We have to collectively, in essence, burn down the Republican Party. We have to level them, because if there are survivors, if there are people who weather this storm, they will do it again. They will take this as confirmation that, hey, it just pays to ride the waves. Look at me, I've made it through. And so up and down the ticket, federal, state, local offices, the country has to repudiate this. This has become a dysfunctional anti-government party. That is not what the country wants and what it needs.
Yes, the Washington Post's in-house conservative columnist Jennifer Rubin, who I actually think is deeply emotionally and psychologically unstable, but that's just an observation based on her public pronouncements and her work. Jennifer Rubin letting everybody know that this is what you do when you derive a paycheck from the opposition, when you're part of the control, the paid and bought, the bought and paid for controlled opposition within the Republican Party. You're not even really opposition, right? You're actually an infiltrator. You are a Trojan horse, and you see a lot of this throughout media. And what it really is they're a little bit panicked. Because what is the future for a Republican who was dancing and singing and doing whatever they needed to do for MSNBC and for CNN? What's the future of a conservative, of somebody who had a platform and was supposed to be speaking for the right, when they just spent the entirety of the last at least year or two, maybe the last 4 years, doing everything good to tear down Trump and to malign his supporters? Where do they go? What's their utility now? Because I got to tell you, maybe the game just continues to be what it is for people like Rubin on MSNBC, where all they do is trash They're Republicans who advocate for nothing but Democrat policies, and now it'll be under a Democrat administration, and all they do is trash Republicans. I mean, the intellectual and ethical just grotesqueness of this is really beyond words, but people are sad and kind of pathetic, especially, I mean, anybody that would repudiate what they've stood for decades of their adult lives just because professionally it makes a little more sense to them. It's a little bit easier, and they still want to get invited to those fancy Georgetown cocktail parties, which are real, by the way. That's a real thing. I know. Believe it or not, I snuck into one or two myself. They exist, where the fancy journos all gather. And, you know, they all pat each other on the back and make sure that they're talking to each other's book agents and everything else. This is a whole industry, friends. It's a whole business unto itself. But I'm not only talking about those in the media, also the Republicans who were intentionally, deeply unhelpful in this last election cycle. And I think you would have to work very hard to come up with a name more prominent than, or somebody who was more obviously this is true about than Mitt Romney. Here he is, play 19.
I'm not going to talk about my vote. That's in the rearview mirror. I'm going to talk now about how I can work with the new president. I know he's on the other side of the aisle, but I want to make sure that we conservatives keep on fighting to make sure that we don't have a Green New Deal. We don't get rid of gas and coal and oil. That we don't have a Medicare for all plan put in place, that we don't raise taxes on American enterprise. That would kill the economy. So, look, I congratulate him, but I'm not going to put aside conservative principles. We're going to fight for the things that we believe in.
Mitt Romney is now the guy who, after watching all of his buddies get absolutely pummeled in a bar fight, once the cops have arrived and it's all over, he's yelling, hold me back, from, 30 feet away around the police cordon. Yeah, thanks, Mitt. Those of us who are conservatives now, yeah, sure. You're really going to do a lot. Really going to do a lot for the country. Would have been really helpful if Mitt Romney had just swallowed his pride and his personal animosity and done more to help Trump in Arizona. But wasn't going to happen, was it? No. And this is the same guy who voted for impeachment. Impeachment, now that we understand, let's all be very clear, of the president asking about what was a completely legitimate investigation into Hunter Biden's various scams and corrupt enterprises. That's what they impeached him for. Remember when it was all, Hunter Biden, he didn't do anything wrong? Oh, right, sure. Who still believes that? Well, Democrats will convince themselves to believe anything they want. But Mitt is still very much part of that Republican wing that's doing whatever it can to pretend that they want to slow down Joe Biden when really they're luxuriating in this Biden declaration of victory. They love it. That's how much they care about conservatism. That's how much they care about the Republican Party and what it stands for, what it's trying to accomplish for people. That's how much they care about being pro-life. Yep. Bring in the abortion fanatic Democrats. Let them run things. But, it'll show Trump what a bad man he is because he lost. That was the bargain they made. You want to talk about a Faustian deal? Here you go. Disgusting, honestly. But that's what you're going to continue to hear from people who pretend that it was all about principle when really it was all about advancing themselves, and at a time when, it was all hands on deck. It's not possible to claim you're a Republican who's pro-life and to have worked against Donald Trump in this election cycle and feel like what you did was moral. That's one area where, get ready for it, the Democrats, they are absolutists on this issue. They are hardliners. No restrictions whatsoever. So you can't call yourself pro-life and have worked to help Joe Biden win this last election. You can't. I mean, if you can, but you're a fraud. And speaking of which, here's Mitt Romney, play 11.
I'm more concerned about the language that's used. I think it's fine to pursue every legal avenue that one has, but I think one has to be careful in the choice of words. I think when you say that the election was corrupt or stolen or rigged, but that's unfortunately rhetoric that gets picked up by authoritarians around the world. And I think it also discourages confidence in our democratic process here at home. And with the battle going on right now between authoritarianism and freedom, why I think it's very important that we not use language which can encourage a course in history, which would be very, very unfortunate.
Has Mitt not been paying attention to, the last 20 years or so in America? The authoritarians come from the left. The authoritarians are Democrats. The people that want to tell you what to do constantly in everything you do are leftists. And Mitt is enabling them and has been enabling them by opposing Trump in the ways that he has. But now he wants to tell us that we should be worried about authoritarians around the world. Honestly, I don't care what other governments are doing. I care about what this government is doing. I can't fight the battles for people all over the world. You know, truth is, some people in some parts of the world want different government than us, want different things than us. That's actually the truth. What's this appeal to authoritarians around the world? This is blather. This is what elites who are looking for some excuse for knifing the current administration in the back, this is what they reach for. This is what they'll bring up. It's nonsense.